You're listening to the Flex Success podcast, where we teach you how to be less shit.
I'm your co-host Lizzie, and this is Dean. We'll be covering all topics relating to health, fitness, and bodybuilding.
Join us as we use our in the trenches experience and up-to-date science to provide you with information that you can actually use.
If you like what we do, be sure to give us a like, follow, share, and tag us on social media.
Back with another Flex podcast. This is an interesting one. It's actually the first this style of podcast. We've got a whole group of moderately average and maybe one or two very good looking men. I'll let you all debate as to who is who on the pod today. We're excited to get a couple of Flex athletes on. So welcome Alex, Daniil and Taylor. Thanks for jumping on, boys. And also Coach George.
Thank you for having us.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Now, I have no idea where this podcast is going to go today. I just thought we'd just jump on a bunch of bodybuilders. Well, I'm a hobby builder, right? Officially back to hobby building and just chat about bodybuilding, what makes a successful bodybuilder, maybe where some of you guys are at right now. So, Alex, I'll kick it off with you, mate. You were deep into the off season, struggling about being over full. Where are we currently at with you, mate?
Mate, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's check-in, actually, because I was actually having a bit of a laugh with a few of the boys today saying, fuck, I think I'm almost ready to put the hammer down again.
Ready to grow again?
Definitely getting there. Fitness is coming good. Resting heart rate's down. Enthusiasm for training's there. Appetite's back. I'm ready to rock.
Yeah, so for those that aren't familiar with Alex, he's just pushed up to 130 kilos. I don't know what that is in pounds. North of 270 something. I don't know. And appetite was definitely at its limit. Food was high. And you've got a weight cap of 104 kilos. So we're significantly above the weight cap for Classic. We've just decided after doing his season in Europe. Was that this year or last year?
It was in the last year.
Yeah, time flies. That we're just going to try and make him as massive as possible and then just make him suffer to make the cap. So currently in a little bit of a bridge phase.
Daniil's laughing there. He knows what that's all about.
Well, when I started, I was 275 pounds. So my first classic show, I had to lose 70 pounds to get into it, and I had like 15 weeks of no carbs. It was pretty torture. I had like 3 hours of cardio daily. It was something else. So I relate to you, the suffering.
Yeah.
Was that for your first ever amateur show, Daniil?
It was the Indiana, you know, the Indy Pro, when they used to have the Indy Pro in 2021, they shut that down. That was my first show. That's the one that Tonio Burton and Nathan Epler, they were fighting for that Olympia qualification. And Justin Rodriguez, I think was there too. He won that show. But yeah, that's how I got my national qualification.
Yeah, damn, 70 pounds. What's that, like 30 kegs, George?
It's a big movement, man. That's a big movement on prep.
Yeah.
What's the biggest loss everyone here's had?
A 116 down to 93.
Okay. 23 kilos. Not too shabby. Not too shabby.
And that beats a 70-pounder.
My biggest is that the one that we did last year, I think, Dean. I think we were up to, was it 122? I think we officially started prep at 118 though, didn't we? Come down to about 104.
Your previous highest weight was about 122 to 123, just nudged. So 20 kilos off pretty much. I've gone from 114 to 89, but there was 4 kilos of basically GI weight in that to make that under 90s last year when I competed. So I wouldn't say it was a fair 20 odd kilos. It was realistically 15 or 16. So it's always more than you expect.
Against the now freak. What
was that, George?
When you lost against the now freak in the overall. Joseph was his name? Was it Joseph? Came with a J.
Yeah, Joseph or Joseph. I'm not sure how you pronounce Czech Republic names.
The farmer that guy that is absolutely ridiculous, lifting handbells and that on his prep, still working, running the tractors, running the field, and turned up looking like a pro. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, and how's this for a side story for anyone that watched the New York Pro where he came fourth, I think it was. we were backstage and they were like calling out a number, and my client Mike was number 9, and they were calling out number 8, and no number 8, no number 8, and I was like, who's number 8? Like, where is he? Anyway, they went out in numerical order. So Mike went out and did his sort of like comparisons from a numerical order perspective. Number 8 was non-existent. And then the next row went out, and then the third row came out. All of a sudden, Joseph shows up. He basically had run into backstage, not even got tanned, got moderately glossed, got on stage, got compared, and then was pushed straight into the top 5 call out. And he was barely even like, he was pretty much just run on and was like, fuck. And like, I think like, man, if he'd have properly pumped up, properly tanned, like that dude probably could have, honestly pushed Tonio for top 2 spot there. So Tonio took first, but just an absolute freak.
That's the goal there, right? Just walk on stage and just be lights out.
Yeah, there's just something about that dude. He's got the widest clavicles and the biggest fucking shoulders, like absolutely crazy. But presentation, I think, was one of the things that a lot of people can work on. Once he gets that nailed, he'll go a long way. And he's only 27, I think, 28.
Yeah, that's fucked.
Yeah,
he's seeing young, seeing him in the flesh was a different ball game. Even when he got his card, it was phenomenal. It's nice to actually see someone turn up and get a card in the UK who was actually pro worthy. Like, he could have gone and done a pro show and placed decently that time. It's not often over here in the UK shows like that. I feel like cards get handed out a bit too frequent than they should, which is why I like the Oz way of doing things. You know, you've got 1 nationals at the end of each season and you go for the card and that's it. Whereas here you get like 2 free cards in some shows. It's a bit takes the what's the word? Specialness.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the Aussie side of things is almost like on the other end of the spectrum, almost too difficult. Like, you'd think there are several times where people probably should have or could be pros and aren't because of how competitive it is, you know. And then you go to the other side of the things, and there's just pro cards being given out left, right, and center.
Well, you know what you got to do, guys? You come over here.
It's still more difficult in the UK than it is in America, right? Like, I remember when I was in New York, there was a show on at the time that Jared Feather was watching. His client, I think, came first in his category, but the top 3 of the show before that, of all categories, got a pro card.
Oh.
Yeah,
I've seen that sometimes.
Not even the overall. There was like 9 cards per division, essentially.
Wow.
What's the go with that? Are they just trying to give as many people, you know, pro cards as possible for a specific reason, or like why is that the case?
I think it's more in relation to creating hype around the. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, bro.
Go ahead.
I think it's more in relation to generating hype around the shows. You know, like if we're leading into a season, you know that X show is going to have, you know, X number of cards. It's going to generate a hell of a lot more hype around the shows, and potentially, you know, have people back up season after season in pursuit of those cards. So it's just like anything, I guess. It's a marketing tool.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, bodybuilding is still a business, you know.
Indeed.
Yeah, I feel like they see, you know, 100 pro cards were passed out here last year, so I have more of a chance of turning a pro. But the thing is, these guys turn pro at like a lightweight or a super lightweight, you know, in the bodybuilding division, and then they can't do anything as a pro ever, you know. So I'm like, what is the sense of getting a pro card? Now you can't even compete anymore because you don't have the amateur chance to compete either. So you're just stuck in that place where you can't get any bigger because genetically, let's say you're you know, limited, and you're stuck with a pro card in the division you'll never utilize it in. So I see this all the time though here in the US. People they can't turn pro in physique or in classic because they're too small. So they're going in a lightweight division in bodybuilding. They're 150 pounds, you know, soaking wet, get their pro card, and then never compete again. So I'm like, what is the sense of that? What are you doing? So
retirement card.
Okay.
I've even heard people talk from a business perspective, like they think getting the card is going to elevate them from a coaching perspective. And any of the people that I've spoken to that have done that have quickly, quite rightly realized that it doesn't really make a huge level of difference. You might get a bit more attention on social media, but when it actually comes down to the clientele you're getting, it doesn't actually really change much. And as always, it would be down to your results as a coach and what you can offer as education, as opposed to having a pro card.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Chucking the old IFBB Pro in the bio is a strong goal for a lot of individuals.
Yeah. This is so. Here's a question. The reason why is, Daniil, like I said, I think there's a lot of people that are just far too light. So, like in Australia, Daniil, for a reference point, you have to win the overall in men's bodybuilding, which almost always goes to the super heavyweight because they're the biggest and it's a bodybuilding show. Occasionally, though, you will get a guy that will win. Like we had an under 80s guy win last year, 2 years ago, now a year and a half ago now. We've had a couple of like sort of under 90 and under 100 kilo guys win, but
let's just give Cam a quick shout out there as well.
Oh, Cam George, the little man, but that's massive, motherfucker.
Let's not get me started on bagging Cam out.
No, I'll do that when he jumps on with us the next time. Hopefully, we'll get him on stage at sometime in the next 12 months. That'll be fun. But you know, like I have this question of like, would you rather be a pro and be non-competitive because you're 150 pounds and you can't even do in the 212, or would you rather be like a very, very good amateur and compete against some of the like high quality guys? I'd rather compete against the best of my like group versus being at the bottom, because it's not like they're really competing against the best by being a pro, you know?
Man, I've had this conversation with a bunch of guys, and especially going back to, I think, as you said, especially for some reason here in Australia, it seems to be the be all and end all. You know, people want to have that title to place in their bio, IFBB Pro or Pro of whatever federation that, you know, they're endeavoring to compete in, and it's really just, it's not the be all and end all. You know, you end up just putting yourself in a position where, as you said, you're again back at the bottom of the barrel. You end up in a position where you're not competitive, and to be honest, you almost end up less relevant than what you would be if you were just actually a good amateur. You know, let's face it, at the end of the day, people remember winners. They don't actually really remember the contest that you're competing in. They're more likely to remember you being a winner or a loser.
Yeah, it's very much the case in Australia, because your opportunity to compete as a pro there is limited unless you're willing to travel, of which case you essentially got to do like a 4-week back-to-back season to do quite well. So it is a lot more difficult there, I think, for sure, for Australians. But you know, it is what it is.
We're making Australia sound absolutely wonderful, aren't we?
Yeah, terrible gear availability, terrible pricing, terrible quality. The gyms are great. The gyms are great in Sydney and Melbourne. I tell you what, it's hot to prep, so there's a problem. Daniil, would you like to move there, perhaps, mate? Maybe we'll.
I was gonna say I was planning on coming there for vacation. Now I'm questioning it.
It's incredible for that. No, Australia's a fucking awesome place. It's certainly not the most conducive to bodybuilding though, long term, I don't think. But what do you do?
I think the pool of athletes that I've seen, though, from, I guess, maybe a mass perspective of population size to how limited the shows are in the amateur ranks, like the quality is always top tier. There's never, there's rarely any comps that I've watched and had athletes in where I've looked and thought, oh, you know, that was a bit myth judging, you know, them top three weren't exactly consistent. Like, there's usually some good, very good quality athletes in that top call out, first place, second, third. They're always very good. Whereas in the UK, you can find the quiet shows, the ones where first who wins the show looks decent and second and third look that they would probably be in third or fourth call out. You know, it's like
Yeah, absolutely, man. The IFBB, especially from an amateur perspective, I mean, I can't speak for all of the federations, but definitely the IFBB, it's definitely top tier. And I think what Taylor was saying before, there's definitely been, you know, probably a lot of guys that have unfortunately fallen by the wayside nowadays that could have quite easily become pretty decent pros had they been in a position to qualify for that at that point in time. But unfortunately, being limited to one pro card per season, there has been guys that have probably not, I wouldn't say been hard done by, but unfortunately they haven't had the opportunity to. Hey Tash. They haven't had the opportunity to get that card and then obviously become competitive at some point.
One thing that you could say about Australia, though, is like relative to population size compared to the rest of the world. In most sports, we are somewhat competitive, considering we have 28 million people, whereas, you know, we're always up the top in whatever sport, or, you know, somewhere around the mark, despite having, you know, considerably less people.
Yeah, that goes across the board. The talent pool as a percentage of quality per person in Australia, I think, is exceptional. And I've seen that even in the amateur ranks as a bodybuilder. I've seen it in the amateur ranks as a soccer player or a footballer. It for sure is that way. So just a matter of, you know, getting off the island at some point, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is difficult,
I feel like
especially during.
I feel like I have a delay every time someone starts to talk. I overtake, but I feel like the judging is better that way too, though. When you know that, you know, there's only one spot for a pro card or two spots for a pro card, to make sure that the judges make sure that they get it right, you know. Whereas if you have 100 pro cards in a show, they're like, oh, whatever. They're not going to care, because the second place is going to get a pro card, and then whoever goes to the overall doesn't even matter, because all the overall winners or the class winners already have a pro card. So they just give them out, and the judging is the quality of the judging is degraded by far here, you know, in the U.S. just because they don't really care. They're like, oh, everybody's going to get it, so practically. So this shows that one person shows up in a division and gets the pro card, and it's a person that did not deserve to get a pro card. You know, like fitness, for example. And I'm not, you know, fitness is a great division, but when one person shows up consecutively at nationals, that specific show, you know, 4 or 5 times, 4 different 5 years, and they get the pro card, maybe you should not do fitness in that, you know, national or pro qualifier anymore, if you see that one person shows up. So I don't know. It feels like having that title IFBB Pro on your bio, or it just doesn't have that much of a worth. It's at the end of the day, what do you enjoy doing? Are you happy with bodybuilding? Are you happy with how you look? Are you happy with what you're accomplishing? And going from there, I don't feel like having the IFBB Pro status, unless you're competitive, has much of a value to it. You know, it's about competing and having fun with it.
Yeah. Alex and Daniil, that's the 2 pros on this one. Would you guys like to see more exclusivity in regards to now pro cards that are offered out?
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to then say determine how often a pro card should be available, what do you think the frequency would be?
You go.
You go first, Alex, because I keep on cutting people off.
Yeah, I feel like I'm doing the same to you. And I'm loud, so I just talk over everyone. I think in certain circumstances, there should be an option for whether it be the promoter or the head judge to make a call as well on whether somebody is actually pro-worthy. I think at times we've seen pro cards get handed out almost by default. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I think we've all been to shows and we've thought, oh, yeah, okay, well, they're the best of a bad bunch. And again, I know that sounds harsh, but I don't mean it in that manner. But at the end of the day, like, if you're going to receive a pro card, I think your goal should be then to use it, not just get a pro card to stick it in your bio on social media. I mean, just as a flex, like, to me, that was never the goal for myself. I don't know what it was for you, Daniil. I can't imagine that it was just to, like, the IFBB Pro card was never the end goal. Like, that was never the be all and end all. It was the opportunity to then be able to step up and compete against guys that were better than me.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when I got my pro card, I competed the week after and placed top 5 on my first pro show. So against guys that have been doing it for years. So for me, turning pro, I wanted to have a pro physique before I got my pro card, because I thought that's what it was about. I didn't think you get your pro card and then you take 5 years to grow and then go compete as a pro bodybuilder. If I'm a professional and I turn pro, that means I'm a professional, right? It doesn't mean, oh, here is a grace period of 3 years for you to, which it's fine. I'm just saying, like, your physique should reflect what you are, a professional bodybuilder, whether that's physique, classic physique, or bodybuilding. And unfortunately, like you said, the end goal for all of those guys is pro card. I think like back in the day, they used to have like, I think like 8 shows, and the overall winner got the pro card in the US. And it was really hard to be a pro. That's why the quality of pros was the quality of pros we had. Kevin LeBron, you know, Flex Wheeler, all those people. We don't have that now. Like, have pros that are, I won nationals in 2021 in December, and we have 40 guys in our class, not the division, the class. I literally stayed there for like 8 hours until I went on stage. I was like, at this point, I don't really care because my pump is gone. I have to sit on the hard concrete the whole day just to wait for my division to go over, you know, and all these guys, you see them backstage, and it's great that they're in the sport, but some of them don't belong in a national stage. I'm sorry to say that. It's just, if someone's hurt and someone's feelings are hurt, it's just what it is. You need to take the time. I did 2 shows in 2015, and I realized that, okay, I won both of them, and I can go to nationals, but why do that if I don't feel like I have a pro-worthy physique? So it took me till 2019, 2020, until I myself were confident in myself, going up to 275, and then dropping back down to 205, feeling confident, saying, hey, now I can go to a national show and not embarrass myself. And then I show up at a national show and see guys how I looked in 2015, competing against me, and now I have to fight through all these bodies to just get, you know, my pro card when they don't deserve to be there. It should be, I'd say 15, 20 people max at a class, you know, for your pro card. It shouldn't be 40 in one class, which then ends up being 200 people in one division at nationals. It's a national show. It's not a big amateur show. It's not, I don't even think there's that many pros that could fill up every pro show I've been at is like 12 people, 12 guys. But you go to a national show and it's 40 in one class. So again, it goes back to, you know, I think it's a money thing, and it should be more about loving the sport thing, and, you know, lowering the okay, if you win a show against a class of 5 people, then you should probably qualify for nationals. But I see classes that have 0 people, and they just give the person the national qualification because there's nobody else to compete against. And then close down that division, that class, whatever you want to call it. Just say, hey, we're not going to have Class A this year because there was only one competitor. You know, because if you don't, then you get all these people that are nationally qualified. Some shows do the top 2 in each class here in the U.S. at an amateur show, and you qualify for nationals. It shouldn't be that easy. Just for nationals, not even the pro card. It should not be that easy, because now I see guys that you know are pros, and I'm like, you'll never compete again, and they know that, and they're like, yeah, well, I'm a pro, so I'm one of the best in the world. I'm like, you're professional in the sport by chance. You're not the best in the world. You know, you're not. It's just, it devalues us as pros. I mean, Alex, I feel like you probably feel the same way. When you step on stage, you expect to see that caliber of physique. You're like, dang, I want to compete against the best, not just talk about it. Not just be like, oh, I'm a pro and I'm going to show up and whatever happens, happens. It's not about that. I want to, the NFL does not get, you know, high school players playing for them. You know, the NBA is not like, hey, I'm going to bring this kid that I know that's good at basketball down the street to blocks, you know. They find professionals. We just take everybody.
Yeah. In what other sport in the world is it where you turn professional and then you go straight, like UFC, you turn professional, you're going to fight in the UFC. You get drafted into the Australian Rules Football League, you're expected to play. NBA, you're expected to play. You know, it's not, hey, come chill out here for the next 10 years and just, you know, whatever, you know. And also I feel like there's like a really fine line between elevating a sport in regards to the financial side of things and diluting it with bad quality. Like that balance seems to very easily tip in one direction. And for instance, like something like boxing, where there's just so many different titles and so many different champions, and, you know, obviously financially for all the promoters and whatnot, it's created, you know, great wealth, but it just dilutes the sport. And then everyone's like, well, who the fuck is even good here?
Yeah, I never realized how many professional boxers there were in the world, or in Australia even, because I was like, oh, so hang on a minute, you're the best. And then I was like, oh, hang on a minute, you're the best at this particular thing that I've never heard of. All right, okay, this makes sense now. But you're right, man. Like, there is no sport where you turn pro and then take time off to become a viable pro. Instead, you actually are an amateur up until the level in which you're determined to be good enough to compete at that level, and then you're drafted, purchased, or whatever it may be. I suppose the biggest difference to play devil's advocate is obviously there's no like major governing body over the top that has the funds to then say like everybody as a promoter can make money in the amateur league. But then once they move into the professionals or the nationals, the way it would work then is if the nationals were subsidized by the IFBB, they could then afford to have smaller numbers and exclusivity because the financial backing isn't required, which is what they're trying to get from all of those numbers. But that would frustrate the shit out of me. That is the one good thing again about Australia is you're going to compete against good guys. And if you win, for sure you're good enough,
I've even had athletes of my own that have been like, oh, let's do a prep and we'll do a state show in, or, X, Y, or Z. And then I'll go to New Zealand or I'll go to Japan or I'll do this and we'll go pro. It's like, against fucking who? Why would you want to do that? Because you're then going to go and be in that position where you're not going to be able to compete against anybody. You're going to have to, you're not going to be good enough to be a professional. You're going to be too professional to then compete against amateurs. And you're going to be stuck in no man's land and probably eventually just burn out of it because you're going to get so frustrated by the fact that you turned pro, which would have seemed fantastic, but you've turned pro 5 years too early.
Yeah, I once had a client who decided that he wanted, this is an amateur, who wanted to do a show that was in this little small town in New South Wales. And it was like 2 to 3 weeks before his major show. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. So it's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. Like, don't be ridiculous. And then at about 7 days out, he said, oh, by the way, I've registered for that show. I'll be going to do that in 7 days' time. I went, that's cool. I'm not helping you this week. Good luck. But just so I know where you're at, would you rather win against the worst or lose against the best? And his answer was, I want to win. And I went, oh, you and I don't align very well. And then I said, do you think you're sufficiently conditioned? And he's like, yes, I do. And I was like, strike two, we're not aligned. After that prep, 2 weeks later, he did the show that he wanted to do. He won it because nobody competed there. He got to put, I got my trophy. Everyone thought he was the winner of what they didn't see was nobody to compete against. And then we finished up our coaching immediately. It's
like that age-old question. It's like, would you rather the best house in the worst area, or would you rather the worst house in the best area? And I think that would correlate very similarly to what those people would do in terms of, like, it's very, very individual in terms of the person that you're talking to or coaching or whatever. But you will get people that would rather win in general, as opposed to potentially be better looking and better presented, but come 4th or 5th or 6th,
It says a lot about the mentality of the individual who wants to win against the worst, I think.
Yep.
The same thing can be said for the individual that wants the pro card just to say they have the card. It's like, do you really have a love for this sport and what you do? Because if you did, you'd rather opt for the longer time in the sport competing than getting the card to drop out. It just shows you your actual internal drive for the sport and your love for the sport. And you're probably not someone who really wholeheartedly cares about bodybuilding, more so just that prestige that you think the card gives you.
When I'm doing my consults with potential athletes, one of the first things I'll literally say is, say social media just completely disappeared and was never to exist again. Would you still want to be a competitive bodybuilder? And you'll get a lot of people be like, probably not. It's like, cool, see you later. It's social media drives so much of this passion for that people think they have, but no, it's the passion for being seen or perceived or praised. Yeah,
it's just narcissism. It's an opportunity to get seen. It's an opportunity to feel relevant in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, a lot has changed. Obviously, there's more and more people wanting to compete, which is great. The wider we can cast the net over the genetic pool, technically, the greater the opportunity we're going to come across absolute freaks. Like we're seeing in nowadays, and like even the new young crop coming up, like someone like a Carlos Thomas Jr. Like, for someone like that to show up, you're just like, fuck, like, I don't know where you came from, but I'm glad you've seen that this place exists. And thank you for giving bodybuilding a go,
Yeah.
But I thought it would be funny actually to ask, because everybody here has at least prepped once. What would be a prep horror story if anyone's got any?
Well, mate, have I had this conversation with you before about? I have had about my prep prior to this, and I'm not going to name any names because I'm not that type of bloke. But my first ever and previous prep literally ended due to I pulled a. It's an example of how fatigued I was. The context is I was doing 2.5 hours of Stairmaster pre-workout. I was on about 1,600 calories. I was about 95 kilos, not stage condition, but I was getting there. And X, Y, and Z compounds and whatnot. And went to pull, and that was probably about 10 weeks out. Went to pull a dumbbell out of the rack, a 30-kilo dumbbell, to start pressing it, and my shoulder just stayed there. My body went this way, and my shoulder just stayed there. Full labrum tear, everything like that, and that was it. That was prep over. And then I went and did the whole works with the hospital and surgeon and whatnot, and told my previous coach that was the case. And he goes, I said I basically can't lift my arm above my head. Oh, we can still compete, just one arm. You kidding? You kidding? One arm. I just got up there and I fucking.
What about Dorian?
So it's just a classic shot in it, hand on the waist.
Yeah. Just a unilateral double bicep, mate. And that was the end of that.
Could have done WBFF.
Yeah, I should have just stood there in a suit.
Because then you can just do one pose like this,
Yeah, just the fucking
little
that was
good to go. So
the first prep ever.
You dislocated and tore your shoulder by picking up a dumbbell that you were ready to do.
Yeah, I've actually got security camera footage of it still on my phone that I've never shared or ever posted because it's just too traumatic to fucking watch. But it was in a small gym in Adelaide. I had been warming up. I felt pretty fatigued that day. I'd just done my 2.5 hours of Stairmaster at X amount of intensity, gotten off that, gone to start training push, and probably my third or fourth warm up in, just went to pull out the 30-kilo dumbbell from the rack, just leant down to pick it up. And as I come out, the shoulder's just going like that. And it felt like my body was still going this way and my shoulder's just stuck. It's like, what's his name? Potato Head from Toy Story, when he holds onto something and his freaking body flies straight off. That's what it felt like, man. And I literally it was the sharpest, most uncomfortable, like I've torn my ACL and had a knee reconstruction. And even that was not of a weird feeling. It felt like someone just sent a shockwave up my arm and then basically just ran to the bathroom dangling my arm. And I was kind of like, fuck, what do I do? I was literally banging my shoulder into the wall, trying to figure out how to get this back in because I had felt like it was dislocated. So I eventually just lifted my arm above my head and just ran into the wall, and it just went click, boom, and went straight back into place, still in agony. Went to the surgeon or the doctor, whatever you want to say. And she basically said, yeah, the initial dislocation probably wasn't what did it. It was probably you running full pelt into the wall, trying to get your shoulder back into that tore everything else. So yeah, that's about as horrific as it can possibly get for a first prep as well, that it took me a long time to be like, do I want to do that again?
Did you compete after that again?
What's that?
Did you compete after that again?
No, this is the first prep since that, which was in very early January 2020, and this is the first prep since then. So it's taken me 3.5 years to build up the courage to. Every time I look at those 30-kilo dumbbells, Dean, I'm like, fuck.
This is the scary thing too, because
you're
not a weak dude, man. Like, you press some weight, you can pull some weight. So it's not like you haven't tested that fucking shoulder out since either.
No, and it is something that actually stays with you. Like, I will go and grab between 15 and 30. And as I'm grabbing it, I'm like, oh, it's just that little bit of and then it comes out of the rack and you're like, oh, my shoulder's still attached to my fucking arm.
Funny you say that, man. I've spoken to Mike Pearson. I remember speaking to him when he was in that recovery phase after he tore his chest. And I remember him saying the same thing. He's like, man, every time I stare at the weight, it's just full blown fucking anxiety.
Yeah.
Well, when he'd torn that pec, right, and then come back and competed 18 months or so now, just on 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago now. And I remember when we first started working together, he actually didn't really even press for that entire prep that he did for that amateur prep, just because he was still so fearful of tearing it. And even then after that, it was like quite a long time for us to get him back into a position where he's like, I think I can probably push something with this. I'm not sure, so pecs are a scary one.
I'd love to see those numbers on him now.
Well, he's hit 140 now.
KG.
He's nudging 140 kgs at the moment. Yep. So what's it, like 305 or 308 pound or something like that? He's a mammoth dude.
And he's not a short dude. Like he's a very imposing human.
Yeah. He'll be on the podcast another time. You wouldn't know Mike Daniil, but he's I think he's got to be what? Is he as tall as you, Alex?
No, he's taller than me, slightly taller.
Yeah. Like just over 6 foot, 140 kilos, but will paint his nails pink and, will have like weird things hanging out of his nose or out of his ear. And he has a little Pomeranian as a dog. He's one of the most,
cool.
he's one of the most
funniest
dudes.
Yeah.
Hilarious. He is a funny dude. So we'll be chasing that pro status just to put in his Instagram bio sometime in the next 12 months. Can anyone
it's nice. It would be nice to see it go to someone like him because you know that he'll do something with it,
He'll be an interesting case. There's him, and like I find people like him that have that like really cool shape, interesting cases in Australia, and that he's too big for classic in Australia, so like he's never going to make it. The question would be then, will he ever even make it in an open division too? Like, as in like moving to open classic. Like, I don't even know if he'd make the weight for that.
It's a long way down for him still. Like, I think he must be. So I'm right on 6 foot. I think he might be 6'1". He might even be 6'2", man.
I think he's 6'2".
He is 6'2", is he? Yeah.
I see him walking around Sydney with his pink beanie and flannel on. And I'm like, that fucker is enormous. And he's just walking, like you see him walk past or wherever, and he's walking down some sort of street. And you're like, it looks like there is a literal polar bear walking with a pink beanie on, standing on its fucking hind legs. He is an enormous human being.
Looks like he's about to go start hustling fucking drugs on the corner.
And he's got a pink or fluorescent beanie on or whatever it may be. And he's fucking, I swear, he's, regardless of how gigantic he is, he always seems to be walking with the shortest humans possible. I swear he's trying to make himself look even bigger. He's always with someone who's like 5'5" or 5'6", and he looks like 7 foot tall.
It's like that famous photo of Thor and his missus. Have you ever seen that? Thor Bjorn, the strong man, and he walked with his missus. And
Yeah.
He has the shirt from the guy in Sydney. I can't think of his name all of a sudden, but it says "strong motherfucker," and everyone's just like, "Oh my god." She's actually like 5 foot and he's like 7 foot. But on that note, actually, of weight categories, do you think classic is about shape, or do you like the weight restrictions collectively? George, I'll throw it to you as a coach.
There has to be some kind of separation in division that really splits bodybuilding to classic. But something I've been pondering recently with the direction of open bodybuilding is like they're rewarding structure and shape so much more. So much more. At what point is the line going to blur too far the other way, or will we see the trend swing back in favor of mass monsters soon? Because in my opinion, that's what open bodybuilding was all about. We had classic, they separated classic off for a reason, to let the bodybuilders that were pretty have their space. They're still big dudes. They're not like they're smaller than some of the open. Some of them are much bigger than some of the open bodybuilders when they actually stand side by side. It was just their weight fitted predominantly for the class. Like, are we going to see that line blur? Because if we're still going to start rewarding the bigger physiques that are more prettier in structure, shape, and flow, surely some of these classic guys could then move up to open bodybuilding and ditch the weight cap, and it wouldn't be a very far jump for them to get into it. I think I like the weight caps because there has to be a division between them all. I think we get too often with all the categories, we blur the lines far too much. Some of the physique guys look like classic guys when they stand next to each other. It's just the posing that's different, and I think we need to have that division that really splits the categories up. Or it would just be a free-for-all. Just, everyone competes in one division and you take the look you like.
Daniil?
I want more weight because I'm struggling to make my weight. So,
feels, brother.
But like he said, I noticed that too with bodybuilding. People are coming in soft, and they are rewarding the soft physique because of the structure over a bigger, leaner physique. I'm like, it is bodybuilding. I understand structure is important, but if the structures are comparable and someone is bigger and leaner, go with a bigger and leaner person because it's a bodybuilding show. It's not a classic show. Because like he said, I've considered going to open multiple times just because I struggle to stay, I won't say smaller, just eating that little. Like my last show, I was eating like 1,200 calories for like, and I did 3 shows back to back. I was supposed to be in New York where I met, Dean, and that's when I got sick because I was, eating so little and pushing so hard. So at some point, like you said, it's either, clearing out the line saying, hey, this is to be classic, you need to have shape, conditioning, and a decent amount of muscle, and this is your cap for that. Or you do bodybuilding and you get as big as possible, as lean as possible. I'm not saying, bring a bucket up there, but have some shape, but at the same time, you can reward a soft physique because they have a better structure than a different physique. Bodybuilding is bodybuilding, muscle, conditioning, proportions. It's not shape. Shape just now is coming in because of classic. What was it like 3 or 4 years ago that, the guts were out there, So now all of a sudden it's going all the way to the other end. If someone doesn't have striated glutes in classic, they don't get rewarded. Why are they getting rewarded in bodybuilding?
Well, that was actually going to be my question, Daniil, is you mentioned condition. I was like, okay, so are we going to say that they are only as conditioned as their fattest body part?
Yeah. How do you gauge conditioning? You know what I mean? Like, conditioning to me is peeled to the bone. It's seeing striated glutes, feathered quads, the Christmas tree popping, and fullness. It's a whole thing. It's the size conditioning, and that's what, for example, the last Arnold, or let's put somebody out there, that Samson Dauda or Andrew Jackson, right? Both of those guys don't have signature glutes or hamstrings. You know what I mean? Like, I went to the Charlotte Cup, the one I won, and I was told that I was too soft. And my glutes compared to their glutes, because I've done that comparison, I have lines, and there's really not much lines there. I'm not as big, obviously. So the bigger you are, the harder it is to get conditioned. I understand that. But how am I a classic guy coming in more conditioned than an open guy? And they're winning an Arnold, and they're telling me that I have to be more conditioned for the Olympia. That was the feedback. You look great, be more conditioned for the Olympia. But I came in with striated glutes. If we take the classic category for what it is, we're supposed to be softer. We're coming from a golden era in the 80s, whatever, 70s, whatever it was, where glutes were not striated. So why are we now the ones that have to be completely peeled to the bone with a weight cap? And these guys that don't have a weight cap get to come in softer and win some of the biggest shows in the world. That's, I
think this
I love
is
the sport,
this,
but I don't know.
This is like by default of why I really like 212, but I also really like classic, because you are forced to achieve a certain level of body weight. It means you're often, as the case for the developed individuals, forced to then also achieve a certain level of body fat. Whereas as an open guy, by default of wanting to be an open guy, you want to be massive, right? So then the fear of losing weight is one of the things that sometimes overpowers the necessity to get lean, because they don't want to lose weight. So they try and remain as big as possible. Whereas for you guys, you're like, I am forced to get as peeled as possible because of my weight cap. So like, I really like the weight caps. I like them across all. And I think, except for open bodybuilding, I think open bodybuilding requires the winner to have some form of a holy fuck value. That to me is what I need out of an open. That's the differentiation, I think, between classic and open for me. Is like, when I see really good classic videos, I'm like, holy fuck, that dude looks unreal. Like, damn, that's pretty, or damn, that's awesome, or check out that flow. Whereas when I see someone in open, I don't mind if they're a little bit softer, just so long as they make me go, what the fuck is that?
it's a balance. But if we look at the female categories now, I know probably not your guys' interest here, but when you look at the female categories, the level and standard of condition and muscularity exponentially increases on both vectors typically as it goes up. You know, bikini through figure, through physique to women's open bodybuilding, they get bigger and the expectation of condition they have to be in is a lot leaner. So that should be the goal as you move up to those top categories, surely, in male bodybuilding as well, that the guys who are in open shouldn't be expected to miss on condition to be bigger and bubblier. They should be improving, or if not being better than the guys in the smaller categories.
It also does seem like the criteria and specific points within said criteria are dependent on different shows or locations or countries. There are emphasis on specific parts of that criteria that are weighted more heavily or less heavily. And it's like, if you've got some criteria, stipulate like what is going to be important, you know, for that competitor to meet, rather than just say, okay, criteria is X, Y, and Z, but we're going to really prioritize this shape, or we're going to really prioritize this conditioning or whatever. It's like, you know, there needs to be some sort of, you'd hope there would be some sort of balance between all of the criteria, as opposed to just, okay, shape, we're weighing this heavily, or, you know.
So Taylor, with that, do you mean like you would weight certain components of the criteria more heavily or less heavily? So like, for example, right now, obviously the mode of judging is you give the person essentially a 1 if you think they're the best, and then the lower score wins, or whatever it may be, right? Or should we be like, have some form of more of an objective system to the subjective nature of judging, where we're saying a conditioning requires at least this level, and that's going to score you more heavily than, say, muscularity in classic, but in the other way for opens, muscularity may actually measure higher than, say, condition. I don't know if it would be possible, but
I think that would alleviate a lot of the competitors' issues with, you know, they told me to come in at this level of conditioning, and they said, or, you know, I heard that they were going to be, you know, placing a lot of emphasis on this, or, you know, for instance, you know, it's a completely different category, but a bikini in Australia in last 2022 season B, they were, you know, I had an athlete that competed and they were like, you need to be much harder, much drier, much leaner. And then we go back, you know, to season A 2012, what are we in? Season A 2023, and fucking losing my train of time. And you know, we've achieved what they've asked for previously, and it's, oh no, now you need to be, you know, significantly less conditioned. We're looking for a softer look, and, you know, X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, fuck, there needs to be some transparency with what's actually being, you know, what the actual criteria is, and what within that criteria, what you are placing a high amount of emphasis on as a judging panel.
Yeah, it's tough because this is essentially like noise within the data set, which is very difficult to control for, especially in a subjective sport. Because, you know, like we've seen this happen, Alex. Last year, we caught up with Daniil, an Australian women's wellness competitor, and she had seconded her debut in Prague, told to come in a little bit sharper, and she was pushing for first. And then 3 weeks later, she got 6th, I think it was, in Romania. And she came 6th to all of the girls she'd just beaten who were markedly softer. So given a certain particular sort of, you know, a set of advice within 6 weeks, that had changed her position drastically for the negative. But this is the problem. You give any one group or the same group of professionals the same set of like data statistics, and then ask them to come up with a conclusion, and you'll see a lot of noise in that data. Like you see this across the board. I just don't know how it's possible to eradicate it. That's the toughest thing with bodybuilding. I think you just have to be happy with what you bring and just keep bringing that. I'm always like that with most of my guys. I'm like, do you want to just come in as big as possible and as fucking peeled as possible? And if you lose because you were too good at one of those, is it really a bad thing? You know?
Yeah.
Obviously a bit different when there's money on the line, but
yeah.
I think that's the big thing, you know, the not just the mental buy-in at that level, but it's the financial buy-in as well. And that's where it hurts most, I think, especially guys that have been competing for a long period of time, and it's more or less their sole source of income.
Yeah.
You mean from like an earnings at shows perspective, or more so that you need to win in order to retain like contracts or whatever it may be else?
Yeah, exactly that. You know, like in order to stay relevant, I suppose. staying that top echelon.
Have you felt the pressure shift, either of you? Daniil, you can go on first. Have you felt the pressure shift since being a pro in regards to your competitive requirements?
Honestly, nothing has really changed turning pro and being an amateur. Like I said before, you need to have a love for the sport, because if you expect to turn pro and feel like you're in the NFL, some kind of pressure or attention, it's not going to come. You know, it ain't coming. How I see it is, I want to beat my last look every time I step on stage. Of course, I'm aiming to win, but in a lot of those shows, I beat guys that beat me. At the Fit World in California, I beat a guy that placed three places above me, and then at Charlotte, I beat him and I got my qualification. So how I see it is, there's going to be different judging panels. There's going to be different people. Do your best, show up the best, love the sport, and go from there. If you see it as, like Alex mentioned, a source of income, you're not going to be very successful. You know, sponsorships, the money that they're paying at the shows is not enough, right? So do it as a love for the sport, and then hopefully you can get something out of it. But what I tell most of the people that get into it is, this is a professional hobby. That's what it is. You don't, you know, and because if you overthink it, you're going to start getting depressed. I'm like, what the heck is this? You know, what am I competing in here? You know, but no, I haven't felt and that's why I feel like I'm doing good, because I don't feel any different being a pro or being an amateur. And once I got to the pro stage and I've seen all the pros that I see on social media and I competed against them, I wasn't surprised, because like we were talking about earlier, when I was an amateur, I was, you know, working to look like a pro. So when I got there, I'm like, I deserve to be here, and I'm here to win. You know, I don't care if you have 100,000 followers, if you have 5 followers, you know? So I don't know. For me, the pressure didn't change. I already had the pressure competitively, you know, but otherwise there was no shift, because you go to those pro shows, there might be 5 people there watching you. So there's not really a pressure change. There's not really a mental shift. If you have to turn pro to have a mental shift, I feel like you're in the wrong sport. In this sport, there's no motivation. It's just drive. It drives me because I love it and I want to keep doing it. If you're waiting for motivation to see someone else doing amazing and winning an Olympia and doing this and doing that, you're not going to get it. You know, even the Mr. Olympia at any of the divisions will tell you, yeah, the money's not in this sport. That there's no attention when you turn pro. There's no, you know, I thought when I first started bodybuilding, oh, I'm gonna turn pro and I'm gonna get like offers from different, you know, companies to get, you know, by the time I turned pro, I was like, I don't even want these freaking offers. I've spent so much money being an amateur, doing the shows, eating, you know, supplementation. I don't want it. So it's just, again, professional hobby. Love it. If you don't love it, don't do it.
I like that,
man,
professional hobby.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. To be honest, when I initially turned pro, I think I did feel a shift, and it wasn't from anybody else but myself. I had a certain level of expectation on the way I felt I should look and I should carry myself, et cetera, et cetera. But once that initial, for lack of better terms, phase, I guess, wore off, I sort of started to take on the meaning of being pro meant something different to me. It meant more so to me, being a pro is just doing what needs to be done, as Daniil said, for the love of it, but also doing it behind closed doors when people aren't watching, you know, like being a positive role model or making sure you're never a detractor from the sport. You know, like I see, especially in the gyms, you know, there's so many egos associated with guys with muscle, or especially guys that are starting to grow some muscle. You know, it's like they have to act like they've got this chip on their shoulder. That was the sort of thing that made me realize, like, from some of the pros that I'd met, because I was lucky enough to turn pro at the Amateur Olympia, And some of the top guys that I met over there, Jay Cutler was probably the best example, man. Like, he met me one day and then remembered my name the next. And I was just like, I'm fucking nobody. Like, how did this guy do that? You know, it was just like, just ensuring that anybody that takes sort of any interest in the sport, that I was going to be a positive impact on the way they viewed the sport rather than ever a negative. But as far as like pressure to win, or that's never really been a pressure, I don't think. It's obviously always been a goal. I mean, Dean, you know me well enough to know the way I speak. Obviously, I don't do anything to lose. But the goal, as Daniil said, is all we can ever ask for is to be a better version of the previous self that we placed on stage. And provided you do that, then that's a win, man.
Mm. It's a really, really, really unique endeavor, bodybuilding. I've spoken about this before, but you guys have essentially just highlighted it, and that is that while you never train or compete to lose, the capacity to lose through no fault of your own is far higher than any other thing I've ever competed in. You know, like if I performed poorly in a soccer match, it was because I didn't do enough most of the time, unless your teammates let you down. But I could have had the best possible contest prep ever. You know, let's say you had a magic prep and got heavier, you know, like grew all this tissue and lost all this fat. You're a freak. And then you stand on stage and someone like fucking Chris Bumstead amateur equivalent stands next to you and you're just like, ah. Like, imagine being disappointed that you lost to somebody of that caliber. If your worth was attached to being first.
Yeah, that was the question I was just about to ask, is, well, what is losing? What's winning?
Yeah.
Depends on which philosophical question you're asking, in what context, I guess. You know, competitively, that's a very easy answer. But yeah, bodybuilding's a weird one, man. I've never been okay with not being first before, like I have losing. Like even in that the overall that Joseph got the pro card in that you mentioned before, George, I was just like, I'm just gonna have fun because there's no chance I can win this. Like standing next to that motherfucker, but I may as well have a laugh, you know.
The only one
it was your all-time best by far, Dean, as well. You know, so like again, like I hate to be philosophical about it, but like what's winning and what's losing? You know, like as far as you competing with you, like bro, it was the best look you've ever fucking put on stage by a country mile.
Yeah, the result of the prep is never, for any of my guys, it's never about what the end result is, but rather the progression. And you know, this was never more pertinent than even just with Ethan just recently in this season that he just competed in. You know, in his debut season, he placed higher with a technically worse physique in the same shows that he did this year, which was brutal for him to handle. Like he just got completely shafted. But like he was 3-4 kilos up in lean tissue. He was leaner than what he was. He presented better. Like he could not have done anything more. And it was just one of those initial, you know, you get kicked in the nuts and then you just have to go, fuck, all right, well, what's the reality here? What am I dealing with? Like you said, Alex, like what was a win to me? Am I okay with it? Yep, cool, continue to move forward. But we'll wrap this up pretty quickly, but what do you think are like sort of the top three things? Then I'll go around starting with you, Taylor, and then I'll go Alex to Daniil, then to George to finish. Top three things you think help become a successful bodybuilder, amateur or pro, doesn't matter.
Top three things that would help you become a successful bodybuilder. As myself being an amateur, what has assisted me is probably, I think we touched on it before, but actually having a legitimate passion for hypertrophy or training or physique development in some sort of capacity, and it not being dictated by the external gratification that you may or may not get from others. I think all of us here in any capacity would still be doing what we are doing from a potential coaching perspective, from a potential competitive perspective, regardless of if, you know, social media dropped off the face of the earth tomorrow and there was no Instagram, no Facebook, no nothing. So having a legitimate passion, and that's probably for anything, you know, anything you do, you're going to excel better at it if you have a legitimate passion and you wake up being like, I want to do this. So I'd say passion, number one. successful bodybuilder. Perspective, number 2, and that may come as a surprise, but especially in like something like a prep where you can, depending on the individual at hand, very, very easily feel like you are doing it more tough than anyone in human existence, when likely that isn't the case. Having, a very, very rounded perspective on things will help you a lot. And that's not something you can just snap your fingers and have. It's probably through life experience and life understanding. But yeah, passion, perspective. And thirdly, I would say a support system. And that can be friends, family, coach, probably more heavily invested on a coaching side, because you can have the best intentions in the world and you can, want to do X, Y, and Z. But if you don't have someone who is legitimately there to, help or assist you and be the best that you can, and they're doing it for their own personal benefit, you're gonna run into some issues. So passion, perspective, support, privilege, to wrap it up.
Fuck, man, it's a hard one to top. And pretty well about everything that.
I'm happy that you asked me that first. I'm like, fuck, I would have been to go last.
Is everyone there? I think I just lost audio for a second.
Yeah, no, it was all right. Taylor just had a bit of a delay. You don't have to disagree. You can say, I like all 3 of those and they're fantastic, but maybe I'll add this one.
Yeah, man, 100% agree with everything Taylor said. That was unreal, man. I think the other one is ensuring that you have your life set up conducive to the goal or the long-term goal from not just a contest prep, but, bodybuilding in general. If you don't have your life sort of pre-set so that your daily habits drive progress, even when motivation may be at an all-time low, then it's just going to make any type of bodybuilding, whether it be a contest prep or just general progression, a whole lot harder. I think that's honestly the main one for me. I'm very much at times a disorganized person, and the moment, Dean, you know how reluctant I am to change at times. The moment things sort of get derailed for me, I wouldn't say the wheels fall off, but my brain goes into meltdown. So yeah, making sure that you've got your life and your habits in line with your goals.
Daniil, you're up.
Oh, sitting here enjoying it. But for me, I agree with Taylor and Alex. I think, adding 2 things, or I don't know if those are necessarily tips, but something that has helped me is, number 1, finding a good coach, because before Dean, I had some experiences with coaches that were, they can make you fall out of love with bodybuilding, you're still supposed to enjoy it and love it. Like Taylor said, you don't want to lose that passion just because, you had a bad prep or 2. Of course, not being, just being Mr. Potato and moving your arm on the dumbbell. I'm talking about like experiences with coaching, right? And then number 2 is probably being, I don't know what the word for it would be, but making things work. Like I have people that I work with that are truck drivers, and they bring their meals with them, have a microwave, or finding ways to make it work. Not everybody has a perfect lifestyle. Not everybody is able to stay at home and eat the meals, 24/7 and nap. Just find, I don't know what you'd call it, not innovative, but
adaptable.
Learning how to work through things. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's it. Being adaptable, having good coaching, which is a part of the support system that Taylor mentioned. But other than that, that's what has helped me recently, mostly. So.
All right, Coach George, mate.
So, GH, Slim. I'm kidding. Someone had to take it there. Come on.
That's the snippet. That's the snippet. We found the snippet.
To follow on from you guys, everyone kind of nailed it, really. I think there's no 3 things we could really just attribute to what makes a good amateur or a good pro bodybuilder in any sense of the word. 2 things maybe to pull upon externally out of this. Knowing your why and knowing the internal drive that gets you out of bed in the morning and following something with pure passion. Like I reflect back on coaching. I've always been someone who has wanted to help people, even from when I was a child. So I kind of naturally would have gravitated towards a job that had this as a role, that I get to help people in whatever walk of life that is. So knowing why you get out of bed in the morning, knowing your why is important to make you a good bodybuilder, and more so being hypercritical of yourself, but in a positive manner, knowing that even though you may feel like you're giving 110%, there is always that 1% that you could be better. And you know what? There is always going to be someone on planet Earth that is doing things better than you are. And that's okay, because you're learning, you're growing, you're getting better, and you're trying to progress. Thinking that you already train perfectly and you already nail your nutrition to the best manner and you're already doing everything perfectly is a surefire way to cut your trajectory of progression massively short. There is always a way you can improve, and you have to be hypercritical of yourself in a positive manner to be able to reflect on that internally and be okay with something that may be slightly negative, a lesson, not a loss. You know, like we said about competing, like every single time you have a loss, it's not a loss, it is a lesson. It's a learning opportunity to see where you can improve to be better. And that's the raw purity of the sport we do, is the constant conquest of personal improvement. That's just what we're striving to do. Whatever way you frame it, that's what we're trying to do, is constantly improving ourselves as people, psychologically, mentally, physically, within our physiques. And we have to have a good latch on the why and the ability to reflect and be critical on ourselves to make sure that we can continue on with that progress. But everything else you guys said, absolutely bang on.
Love it. So I agree with nothing. And I'm going to just give that. That's not true. Of course, they're all fantastic. I think I'll say two things. One is that find the joy in the monotony of repetition. I think if you can find the joy in that, you'll do exceptionally well as a bodybuilder. And I would also say, take a moment to realize that you may never be satisfied with the results that you get, but you will be content. But because of this, it doesn't mean that you should not love yourself for what you're already doing. And if you are a process-focused individual, you'll find it a lot easier to continue progressing in all of those things that you just mentioned, George, because it's the actions that you can rely upon to drive your satisfaction as opposed to the end result, because the end result never actually fucking happens. You know, I always say this, but if you focus on the physique that you want to put on stage every week when you do a check-in for me, it's going to get hard real quick, because that physique's not going to exist for another 16 weeks. So what is success? What is winning, Alex? As you mentioned before, success is nailing those things relentlessly and being very, very satisfied in doing so. Last but not least, we always finish with a would you rather. We usually have a couple other segments in the Flex podcast. But
hang on a second. I've got one for you, Dean.
Oh, yeah?
You boys been following Dean's posts recently?
Yeah. Stories or posts?
Couple of little snippets of him flexing in the mirror and little flashbacks.
Yeah.
So, mate, you keep saying to us that you're done with bodybuilding, and anybody that's watching your social media knows that that's fucking bullshit.
Well, I'm done with competing.
Okay, all right. It's done competing. For how long?
Indefinitely.
That was actually
For the foreseeable future.
Actually a question that I was going to. That was a question that I was going to ask if given the opportunity. Was what, Dean, would it take for you to sacrifice your enjoyment of travel and experiences and all these things to what would drive you to want to get back up there if that was ever going to be the case?
I don't know if anything honestly would be great enough to like it. So fleetingly, I will be like, oh, I'd love to do that again. That happens all the time. There's no doubt about it. I've been to shows where I'm like, there have been to shows where I'm like, fuck, I could have won that, you know, or you know, I could probably like sneak a pro card there, whatever it may be. All of these things, they always happen.
But are you going to after?
No, so this is the other thing. If I got a pro card, it'd be a retirement card, because my height and weight is not sufficient to fit in any category. I'm definitely too tall to be a 212. I'm definitely too small to be an open bodybuilder, and I'm not classic. So the thing that would stop me though is the moment of reflection where I would truly sit down and have a conversation with myself, and then obviously with Liz as well, and be like, what would this achieve? Like, what am I trying to truly achieve by competing again? And I went out on a winning high by winning the title that I was at for the British show, and I was quite content with competing against somebody who turned pro. I've actually lost 2 overalls now to 2 pros. Michael Lucy beat me in 2018, and Joseph beat me in 2022. So like, it's not a bad caliber of individuals to have lost to. I thought the last prep was very successful. I enjoyed it incredibly under Joe's watchful eye. It was nice to divorce myself from the prep and just mentally like relax into it. So I had a really positive experience, and I probably wouldn't do it again because I don't really think there's anything for me to achieve out of actually competing again. But it's not to say that I wouldn't try and like be a little bit bigger again sometime. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm starting an Olympia prep, so that when I show up there and stand next to Daniil, I don't look too small. You know, can't be having that.
I was like, when I met you, I was like, dang, I thought you were a competitor. I didn't know you were there just watching you're pro. I was, to me, it would just be interesting to see you on stage because of how good you look, you know?
It is the thing when
you gotta understand this asshole is traveling at the moment and staying in this sort of condition.
I was literally just about to say, everyone might his look like on social media, but this is Dean just being, you know, the nomad life. This is what he looks like. It's fucking
he's a fuckwit.
That's cool.
But it wasn't this way, right? Like I've obviously been I've been in the hobby builder phase before, where I was just training because I genuinely enjoy it. It keeps me healthy. It allows me to do the things that I want to do from a day-to-day basis. And I was definitely a lot softer than what I am now. And I've been a lot bigger and softer, and I've obviously been a lot leaner. It's just that this is, I suppose, like for me, like people have asked me all the time, like, why do you stay so lean? Well, one, I actually find it pretty easy now because I've done it for so long. And two, it's another factor for me to control that I like. Given that I can't be as big as I want to be, I may as well be lean because I can control that. You know, I don't want to be like moderately. I want to be smaller than what I was and also fatter. Like that's a double fail. You know, so you know, and also it's easier for me to control being lower body fat when I'm not tracking officially. When I eat like based on like, you know, an informed approach, I find it easier to eat less than I do to eat more, because when I eat more, I always think, I probably didn't need that amount of food. So it's harder to like consciously add more food when not legitimately tracking. When I'm tracking, I find it very easy. So not going to happen, Alex. I'm just going to live vicariously through everyone and post pictures occasionally just to get that social gratification and hope that people like double tap.
What was it you said you I'm trying to remember, was it you optimally quit? I loved that term.
Yeah. Exactly that. It was we had a whole podcast on optimally quitting when the time is right. Which is really fucking difficult because there's always the idea that you may be able to be better. And quitting when you're in front, ooh, it's difficult. Or it's super difficult because there's always that, oh, but what if? And I still have this moment now, I'll tell you what, that is that I'm like, fuck, if I can walk around like this at 94, if I pushed up to 105, I could probably come down to like 98. Like I could do it, but
is it worth
then what happens, you know? Well, again, like what happens? I probably end up in the same position as what I am now at 12 months from now. I just have to go through that whole thing for what? And then the other thing too is that my focus is honestly just legitimately shifted as being as good of a coach as I can. This just allows me to be completely mentally bought in on the coaching game. Not that I think that I failed on that when I was prepping. I mean, I fucking picked 10 dudes for that nationals that Cam won his pro card at 2 a.m. in the morning in Portugal. Like, you know.
Yeah.
But there's certainly 11. Yeah, but while I did that and gave all of my clients my time, I probably didn't give Liz any time. So, you know, there's always a trade-off, mate. There's never not a trade-off. Yeah. All right, now I have a question. You can collectively, I'll go raise a hand for this so that you don't have to answer. Is, do you want a fucked up would you rather, or do you want a topic specific one to bodybuilding?
Is this kind of one that Liz?
She sent it to me this morning, and I'm like, yeah, that's a bit fucked up.
We've talked enough about the bodybuilding. Let's go fucked up. All
right, we got two for Alex. I already know your answer. Don't worry about it. So Daniil, you have no say. All right. So the question she sent me, this came from a friend of ours, Daniil. He got asked this on his Instagram, and it was the following: if your toilet was a sentient being, would you rather it crave your waste or despise you for it?
Hey, hang on, give me that again.
George's face.
I don't think I grasped that. Go again.
So it's so wrong. if your toilet was a sentient being, so in that it has feelings and emotions,
Yeah.
would you rather it crave your waste or despise you for it?
I would much rather it despise. I would hate nothing more than going to take a dump and hearing the toilet go, "Oh fuck yeah!" when you're taking a shit. That would be the worst, most off-putting. My digestion would be fucking ruined because I'd have to get off the toilet every time.
Now, just to clarify, Taylor, is that because you would be uncomfortable emotionally, or because that noise would make you hard and then it's difficult to shit with an erection?
It would be. It would be. I would be significantly aroused by the noise. Therefore, that would make me uncomfortable that I'm being aroused by a toilet. Oh fuck, that's funny.
I don't know how I answer this one, man. I'd have to hope that the toilet liked it, to be honest, because the stuff like 300 grams of protein a day, man. That poor fucker.
Yeah, bro, I'm the same. I'm the same. I would sort of I would enjoy the feeling of, you know, passing those movements. Yeah, as George said, like when you're consuming a considerable amount of protein, I would hate to feel like I'm burdening the toilet. Right? I hope that it thoroughly enjoys it. I actually hope that my toilet thoroughly enjoys it. I spend enough time there.
All right, then. So you have to think about this. It's not just as simple as the act in which you're doing now, Alex, but rather when you get into prep and then you only poo once a day, now you've taken away what it really wanted. Are you okay with that?
Yes. See, this is, I suppose it's just the double-edged sword of contest prep, right? You know, like we all withdraw a little bit at some point. So I feel if my missus has to miss out on, you know, some quality time or potentially some quality, you know, mental connection, well, the toilet's just going to have to fall for the same sword.
Wondering, you know, if there's any stint of time where things go a bit dry, at least you always have the toilet that appreciates you and gives you some sexual recollection.
Right, so Taylor, you're the only.
I couldn't do it. I'm the type of bloke that'll grab the caged eggs instead of the free.
I've lost him.
Free range eggs just to stick it. Am I there?
You're just a little bit behind.
Oh, I don't know what the fuck's going on. No, I couldn't do it. I would much rather just burden this toilet with everything that I have every single time than to hear it fucking, you know, enjoy what it is receiving.
You soulless cunt, you.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm the type of bloke that'll go and spitefully grab the caged eggs instead of the free range, just out of pure spite. It's the same thing with the toilet. I'm going to fucking shit in you.
That's so much better.
I think I'm delayed again.
Oh, Taylor, the interesting thing is, no one said that the toilet was going to make noises. We only said that it had feelings.
I'm thinking that.
So the poor thing could enjoy it in silence. It could also suffer in silence. But if you want to picture the voice, mate, that's your prerogative.
How else what would be the determining factor of us knowing if it was liking it or not liking it?
If it had a bidet function and it squirted at you.
I will say on this finishing note to clean this podcast up in note of the bidet, if you ever get the opportunity to sit on a Japanese toilet, I highly recommend it. But don't do it if you're not prepared to buy one for your house, because you'll never go back to a normal toilet again.
There was a reason that I stayed an extra week in Japan, and let's just say it wasn't for the Japanese culture.
Is it because you learned if you turned around and faced the front, it tickled your balls?
I need to get back there and try that.
Did you notice that it has a front bum one and a back bum one?
It was highly confusing to me. Yes, it was highly confusing, and I found out rather aggressively, per se.
It warmed you up afterwards, I'm sure.
It did get an abundance of use.
All right, boys. Been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the chat.
We'll say.
All right, boys. Been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Too easy.
All right. Pleasure.